So now we've learned about the basics of algorithmic composition, and we've learned about EarSketch and Python and text editors. So now we're ready to actually sit down and write our first Python script with EarSketch. So what we'll be doing in this video is learning about some basic concepts in Python programming, and we'll write a very simple script that makes one sound in our EarSketch DAW environment, and then we'll look at how to run that in the EarSketch Online system to actually make the music. So here's the code. It's pretty straightforward. Pretty simple. I'm going to go through the basics right now, and then in the next few slides, go through it in much more detail. So we start off with a comment here. This is just for me or anyone else who's looking at this code to read and understand what's going on. The computer actually ignores those lines. Next, we import the EarSketch API, all the API functions for making music with EarSketch, with that line from EarSketch import star. Then we call a few important functions. Init, which starts a new music project in our DAW, and set tempo, which sets the tempo of that project to particular beats per minute, in this case 120. Then we define a variable, which I'll explain more about in a minute, to represent a particular sound in our EarSketch sound library. And then we call a function called fitMedia, which places that sound on a particular track, in this case 1, starting in a particular measure, here measure 1, and ending in a particular measure, measure 5. Then we print a message out, in this case just hello world, that can be read by whoever's running the script. And finally, we call finish, which tells EarSketch to finish up everything in the DAW and get it ready to actually play the music. So I want to go through this in a bit more detail now, kind of section by section. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was this application programming interface. This line from EarSketch import star needs to be the first real line in every EarSketch script that you write. It brings in all the functionality of EarSketch and says, basically from the EarSketch package, I want to import star. I want to import everything from it so it's available for me to use in the script. If you didn't have that line there, when you called some of these EarSketch specific functions like init or set tempo or fitMedia or finish, you'd get an error message because Python wouldn't know what those were since it hadn't loaded in that EarSketch API yet. The next thing I want to talk about are comments. Comments in Python are lines that start with the hashtag character. And when you put in a hashtag, or if you put it in the middle of the line, you can do that as well. Anything after the hashtag is ignored by the computer. So why would you want to be typing in a bunch of stuff that's ignored by the computer? This doesn't change how the program runs at all, but it's very important because anyone else who might be looking at your script uses these comments and reads them as a way of figuring out what it is you're doing, what you're trying to do. And I find actually, if I've written some code and I come back to it in a month or two or even a year or two later, those comments are really critical for me to actually understand what I was trying to do, because I might not even remember anymore without seeing those comments to jog my memory. The next thing I want to talk about are constants, and there's only one constant in this script, techno club 5th pad 001. That represents, like I said before, a particular sound from the EarSketch sound library. But a constant in general is something that never changes. It's something that has a particular value assigned to it that stays the same throughout your script. And all these constants from the EarSketch sound library are predefined. They're the ones you're most often going to be using when you write EarSketch scripts in Python. You'll notice that the constant is in all capital letters. That's a convention that programmers use so that they know that it's a constant. And it also has no spaces. Instead of spaces, you see these underscore characters. Constants cannot have spaces in their names. Unlike constants, variables are things, as you would guess by the name, that can change throughout the script. So in this script, we have one variable called mySound, and by convention, they also have to be a single word. They can't have spaces in them. By convention, we use mostly lowercase letters in variable names. So I defined a variable. I gave it a memorable name, something that made sense to me, called mySound, and I assigned it this constant, the techno club 5th pad 001. And then this is an assignment statement here, this line, because I'm saying I'm assigning, by using the equal sign, I'm assigning the value of this constant to the variable. Down here, this is a reference to the variable because I'm just using the variable name to say I want to pull whatever value I stored in that variable, whatever I put into that bucket, I want to take it out and use it here. So by using mySound here, I'm saying I'm taking that value I'd stored, the techno club 5th pad, and I'm using that in that particular location. There's a lot of function calls that appear throughout this script that do different things. Notice function calls also consist mostly of lowercase letters. They have no spaces in them either. they do have something special. At the end of all of them, you see these parentheses. So the init function, there's nothing in the middle of the parentheses. There's nothing between them because we just, every time it runs, it does the exact same thing. It just gets our EarSketch DAW project ready with a new project. Set tempo, on the other hand, has a number in the middle here, 120. And that's called an argument or a parameter for our function. And that's sending some specific information to the function about what to do. In this case, it's the tempo in beats per minute that we want to use. So whatever tempo whatever number I put in there becomes the tempo of our project. And then some functions, like fit media down here, have more than one argument. So here we have 4 arguments that are separated by commas. And so my first one, and we'll get into more details of the fit media function later, but the first one is the sound we want to use. The second one is the track. The third one, the starting measure. And the last one is the ending measure. So I can have multiple arguments to functions by separating them by commas. And then finish, again, has no arguments. So all of those functions are part of the EarSketch API. Print is a function that's actually built into Python, so that's not part of the EarSketch API. Unlike EarSketch functions and Python functions, print is a very special function because it does not use parentheses. You just send it whatever you want to print, and print is kind of unique in that way. You won't see that with other functions. So that's the exception to the rule. Finally, I want to talk about strings and numbers. That's the final kind of thing that we see in this script. So the argument to print here is a string, a sequence of characters. And you can see it's identified as a string because it starts with a quotation mark and ends with a quotation mark. You can use either single or double quotation marks in Python. You also see a bunch of numbers here. Those don't have quotation marks around them because we want to recognize them as numbers that we can do math on, addition and subtraction, and all kinds of things like that. We're using numbers here for the tempo and the starting track and ending track and so on and so forth. So now that we've written this basic script and we understand how it works, I want to go ahead and switch over to EarSketch and show you how to put it into EarSketch and run it and hear the music. So I'm going to switch over to my web browser here, and I already copied and pasted the code into the EarSketch text editor here. You can type directly into it, or you can copy and paste in, whatever you want, but you can see all the advantages of our text editor here, the line numbers, the coloring of different things, like comments are in a special color, and numbers are in a special color, and strings are in a special color, and so on and so forth. Once I have that there, I hit the Run Script button, and you'll see a green bar comes across the top to script run successfully. You can also see down here it says Hello World. When I did that print Hello World function, it printed that out in our console area down here. Next, I'm going to go to the Workstation tab, and here I see what looks a lot like Reaper, a standard DAW kind of view, and my music is right here. So I can go ahead and play that. Now this is a little bit different from Reaper. I have my transport controls like in Reaper. I can play, pause, rewind, fast forward, play in a loop, and so on. And I have my track view, and I can solo and mute tracks as well. I can click my play bar if I want to move around different places as well. And I can zoom in and out here if I want to. I can't edit the audio like I can in Reaper. This is simply showing me a view of what's coming out. If I did want to edit that and do something more significant with it, I can go to this More Options menu here, and I can say Save to RPP. And if I do that, it will give me the option to download what I've created and open it in Reaper and edit it further from there. So to review what we've covered in this unit, we've looked at basics of Python, using the import statement to bring APIs into Reaper, writing comments for ourselves or for other people to understand what we're doing, calling functions and putting arguments or parameters in between the parentheses in our function calls, using variables and constants, and using strings and numbers as well. We also looked at how to take a Python script that we've created and to run it in EarSketch so that we can actually make music with it. What we're going to look at in the next video are some of the EarSketch API functions in more detail.